All right, friends. This is the Zero to Hero Governance and ALM Mentorship Group. It is my joy and honor, to say the least, in having Mike and Manuela here. I was sharing a note with friends of mine in other group. I say, hey guys, if you're not busy, join us. Come learn CoE from the people who actually build CoE. So it is a great honor to have you both here. Thank you so much for dedicating time, reserving some time for lecturing us, teaching us all the cool stuff about governance in Power Platform. Without further ado, Mike, Manuela, the floor is yours. Take it away. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Could you, slightly logistical, could you make me a presenter so I can share my screen as well?
For sure. Let's
Perfect.
get that
And then
done. Mike, I think you're already a presenter, right?
I am not on this one.
Okay. Well, you are now.
Are you, Manuela? Are you on?
I am now, yeah. I've just brought it up in the chat on the other side. I'm all set. So yeah, thanks for joining the call. I'm Manuela. I'm a program manager on the PowerApps custom advisory team. We work really closely with customers on helping them adopt Power Platform at enterprise scale. So typically who we work with are, customers who are looking to roll out Power Platform to every one of their employees, at least as, kind of end users. And as part of kind of our journey of working with customers, we have a lot of learnings around Power Platform adoption, establishing a center of excellence and governance. And through that work, we've developed a toolkit called the CoE Starter Kit. And in the next hour or so, we'll share a bit of that work with you. And then, Mike, if you want to introduce yourself as well.
Oh, sure. I dropped my camera, but I'm Michael Ochs. I work on the PowerCat team. I am primarily focused on ALM for Power Platform. The ALM Accelerator is a part of the CoE Starter Kit, and I will discuss some of that after Manuela walks you through all the goodness that is the CoE Starter Kit.
Thank you. I have a bit of a cold, so hopefully I'll make sense to you, and I won't. Hopefully hopefully you can understand me okay. I've got a bit of a sore throat there. So as part of the agenda today, we'll talk first about the CoE Starter Kit and kind of taking it like almost back to the foundation of like what do we mean when we talk about the center of excellence, and how can a kind of tooling approach help with that? So why does the CoE kit exist? And then I'll walk through a couple of demos of what's in the CoE kit as well. And then after that, Mike will focus on the ALM Accelerator tools and best practices, and also a demo if I haven't used up all of the good demo credits. So kind of like before I even want to talk about the CoE kit and the tooling approach, I really want to kind of set the foundations of what we mean when we talk about a center of excellence. We have quite a number of customers who install the CoE Starter Kit and think that they're done. And that they now have a center of excellence. But really, when we talk about a center of excellence, we mean a team, a function within an organization that is responsible for making sure that the Power Platform strategy is aligned with the digital transformation strategy of the company. They kind of nurture makers and come up with kind of how Power Platform should be used in the organization, kind of the rules of engagement, use cases, the security and the governance, and making sure that you get value from the investment that you've made in the Power Platform. As part of that. And typically when we kind of see organizations establish a center of excellence, the responsibilities fall into these 4 pillars. So the first one is, securing the foundations of Power Platform, establishing data loss prevention policies and an environment strategy, kind of making sure that your security roles are set up, that tenant isolation, for example, is set up. And then as you let people loose on the platform, the second pillar is really focused around monitoring what's going on and gaining insights into who is creating apps and flows, what are they being created for, what connectors are being used, what are some of the kind of frequent use cases or makers on the platform. And then use those insights to refine your policies, your processes, and your training processes, but also identify kind of champions through that process, identify success stories, etc. The third pillar that we don't always see, but kind of very often see, is around app modernization. And that is kind of where a central Center of Excellence team has a focus on developing Power Platform solutions themselves. And that's really kind of to replace legacy systems, paper forms, third-party systems. Often that is really relevant at the beginning of your Power Platform adoption journey, where citizen developers and citizen makers in business units might not know what to build with the Power Platform. They don't know what this is all about. They've maybe seen some great demos at Ignite or the Business Application Summit, but they don't know where to get started themselves. So if you have a central team that can develop some solutions themselves, that can kind of serve as inspiration and as a starting point. And then the fourth pillar is really focused around nurturing. A very, very big aspect of Power Platform adoption strategy is making sure that you create and foster a community, you share best practices, and you kind of have internal like upskilling opportunities and almost career strategies for your makers. So yeah, that's kind of the when we talk about a Center of Excellence, those are the pillars, that's the team that we mean. And depending on kind of the organization and I guess the size of your Power Platform adoption strategy, sometimes all of these pillars are fulfilled by the same person. Sometimes there's, a team of multiple people involved in delivering that. And then most often it's, start small and then grow, the team and the strategy grows as makers adopt the platform. And then the CoE Starter Kit is really a templatized implementation of best practices designed to give you a starting point with kind of administering, governing, nurturing Power Platform adoption. It is the how, once you figured out what you're doing with Power Platform and why you're doing it. The tooling approach of the CoE Starter Kit can help you achieve some of that, automate some of that, give you some of the insights that you need, but it can't kind of, it doesn't take away from you having to define the strategy for your approach. So like I said in the beginning, our team is the customer advisory team. As such, we work really closely together with customers, and everything that you see in the CoE Starter Kit is inspired by learnings that we have from the largest organizations that we worked with. If we've seen someone be successful with a tooling approach, we've then worked together with that organization, templatized it, and made it part of the kit. So there's kind of an unwritten rule that we wouldn't put anything in the kit that we've not seen at least kind of one customer be successful with. So as you're kind of using the kit, you can kind of rest assured that most of the patterns and best practices are like based on real world scenarios and real world usage of what some of our other customers are doing. When we work with kind of customers on their Power Platform adoption journey, we typically, I try to kind of bucketize it into like three personas that we see involved in the Power Platform adoption. There's obviously kind of the admin persona or Center of Excellence lead. They are responsible for making sure there's a governance and compliance strategy that's aligned with kind of corporate goals, with security, like information security strategy, etc. And they work with makers on handling requests. Then there's the maker persona. They're somewhere in the business, and they really need to be effective and efficient in using Power Apps and Power Automate to digitally transform their organization. They are a key part of that digital transformation journey, and they kind of want to use the Power Platform. And then there's like the everyone persona, someone who might not be a maker themselves, but they have exposure to Power Apps and flows that their colleagues have been built, and they just want to make sure that they also know what's available in the Power Platform. As we work with these personas, there's kind of frequent questions that we get, and we've try to address, I guess, like every tool in the every component of the kit tries to address some of these questions that we see. So typically, a lot of the kit is focused on that admin persona. That's where we see a lot of the questions come from. And for them, it's usually it's kind of important to get a holistic overview of everything that's going on in the tenant, the ability to answer questions that other teams might have. They want to get awareness of things that are highly used and things that are no longer used, kind of have a good view of what's going on in their tenant. And then typically kind of as the adoption grows, a lot of the things that they do manually, they want to automate so that they can really focus on making an impact rather than just spending time on mundane tasks. And that's the beauty of the CoE kit is that in order to govern the Power Platform, we've developed tools with the Power Platform to help with that, reducing that manual effort. And then typically kind of from a maker persona, I guess where the kit really focuses, or the strength of the kit is really on the communication between the admin and the maker, kind of getting that out of email and having request processes in place so that makers can request what they need and admins can approve that, but equally kind of making it easy for the maker to follow governance and compliance processes that the admin has laid out. And then relatively, I guess, like a smaller part of the kit is focused on that everyone persona, but really kind of the questions we try to answer for them is like, I want to learn what's available in my organization, what I can use already. I want to start training to become a maker myself. And I want to submit ideas for things that might need building. I'm an end user. I've used some apps. I know what kind of flows do. I don't really know how to make it myself, but I've got an idea of a business problem that I have that I think could be solved with the Power Platform. So in the next couple of slides and through the demo, I'll show you some of the things that are in the kit that address those questions. And then next week, we've got a deep dive session where we dive a little bit deeper into kind of how to configure it and how some of the components are developed. But today, it's really, the focus is really on giving you an overview of some of the things that are in the kit and the questions and business problems we're trying to address with those components. So kind of the core part, and I always call it the heart of the CoE kit, is a Power BI dashboard that gives an admin an overview of everything that's going on in the platform. Many of the admins that we work with have been kind of burned in the past by Excel and Access applications in their business that have become kind of business critical, and they have a fear of kind of that shadow IT. And the Power BI dashboard really is to bring light to that shadow and show the admin persona that yes, they can see everything that's going on in their tenant, and they can answer like perhaps difficult questions that they get from their information security team. So I'll do a demo of the dashboard here, just because demos are more fun than slides. So we have two dashboards that are part of the kit. The first one is really primarily focused on that holistic overview and being able to browse kind of what's going on in the tenant. So there's a lot of pages in this dashboard, and all of them are, serve the purpose of helping you get an overview of what's going on. So for example, your security team might come to you and say, look, I've heard that there's custom connectors in the Power Platform. I'm not sure what are they being used for, who's using them. So you can look at the custom connector tab here, and you can exactly see these are the custom connectors. That's the host, so that's what they're connecting to. These are the applications that are using them, and then obviously kind of you can see the maker and the environment that application is in, and the same for flows. So you've got this custom connector here. It's connecting to manage.office.com. It's used in this flow. Lee is the maker, and this is the environment that it's in. So if your information security department then has further questions, you can give them Lee's contact details, and they can work with Lee on, why that custom connector is being used. Equally, you might have, a procurement department that is trying to kind of wrap their head around whom to cross-charge with licenses. So we've got this license assessment report here where you can see the number of applications that you have. You can drill down into connector tier and immediately see I've got 26 applications that use a premium connector. And then you can then drill down into the department. Unfortunately, my demo tenant, I haven't populated all my departments, but you get the idea. I can see that the marketing department has 8 premium applications. So if there's a license cost that I want to cross-charge, I can do that from here. I can from here. Again, this is not going to be a good example because I've not shared these applications, but you can see kind of the users and groups that this application is shared with, and even kind of see how many sessions are on that. Like how often these applications are launched, if kind of your cross-charging is based on usage versus shared. So yeah, you kind of like get the idea. From here. You can really learn a lot, and you can really drill down into a lot of different aspects, be it kind of connectors that are being used. So you can really see you could kind of drill down into everything that's using the Dataverse connector, or everything that's using the Dataverse legacy connector that's being deprecated, and then work with the maker on them migrating to the new Dataverse connector. So that kind of the main focus of this dashboard is really browsing, I guess, searching, filtering, seeing what's out there. We then have a second dashboard, and the focus there is really, so we only launched this a couple of months ago, and really the feedback we had on the first dashboard was, oh, this is great. I have confidence now that I know what's going on with the tenant, but I really don't know like what are the actions that I should take on this. So we introduced this second dashboard, and the idea is to give you things that you as an admin need to take care of relatively imminently, I guess. So it could be things that like flows that are suspended, for example, they're not running anymore. Flows and apps with no owners, so they're abandoned, like a maker has left the organization, and these flows kind of still exist there. Flows using plain text passwords, which could be a security risk there. All of that is kind of highlighted here and gives you almost as an admin, it gives you kind of a to-do list of what to do. And then from here, with kind of each of these tiles, you can drill through, get the details of the environments, apps, flows that are impacted, and then take action from there. So here I've got a couple of environments that don't have any apps or flows. All of them have been created relatively recently. So I'm going to give the person that's created them a little bit more time to create something in them. So probably here I don't need to take an action right now, but like one of the actions could be to obviously go to the admin center and delete the environment if it's no longer needed. So yeah, kind of a really big part of the CoE kit is the dashboard, and a lot of our customers, when they first install the kit, spend quite a significant amount of time getting familiar with their existing usage. Obviously, if they've kind of already got usage there. As we and then as kind of as an admin gets familiar with their with the usage in their tenant, they often then want to kind of automate certain aspects of their governance processes. So the typical kind of worry of admins is apps and flows with no owners, where the owner has left the organization. That can make managing the platform really difficult if you don't have anyone to reach out to about a certain asset. So there is an automated process, part of the CoE kit, that checks if a maker is still part of the Active Directory. If they aren't, they get it gets the list of the apps and flows that maker has created. And then if we know the previous manager of that maker, we send that manager a list via Teams using a Teams adaptive card. And that manager then has the responsibility of reassigning the app, deleting the app, or taking ownership themselves. And really the admin isn't that involved in the process, and only is involved if we can't figure out who the previous manager of that person was. And then a relatively similar process is in place for inactive resources. Again, if you have something in your tenant that's not been used in a very long time, it can lead to like a really cluttered environment. End users still see everything that's kind of shared with them, even if they're no longer using it. It obviously can cause kind of capacity issues, license issues. You may be less agile in kind of making decisions. So this process, the admin isn't involved at all. It just kind of sends an approval task to the maker to ask, like, this thing hasn't been used in 6 months. Do you really still need it? Or can we kind of delete it from the tenant, and then the maker can approve that. If it's approved, the app or flow will get deleted from the tenant. If they don't approve it, they can provide an exception reason, and the admin can approve that exception. So it could be something that's valuable for them, even though it's no longer used, like something that they use as a template, for example. So a lot of the CoE kit kind of after the dashboard is focused on some of these what we call governance processes to reduce the manual effort that an admin has to do. And that is also true for the next application. A typical kind of first step when admins adopt the Power Platform is they lock down who can create environments to protect the capacity that's available in the tenant. Once environment creation is locked down, that obviously doesn't mean that makers don't need environments anymore. And if it's really difficult for makers to request environments, they're led to making like the incorrect decision. So they might build something in the default environment because they don't have access to anything else. So the maker request tool that's part of the CoE kit allows makers to request environments and admins to approve it. So I'll drag over the demo here. Hopefully nothing has timed out in the meantime. So from a maker point of view, I can select to create a new environment. I can tell the admin these are the connectors that I want to use. So I'll just select Dataverse here. I want Deborah to be the admin, the additional admin on the environment. It's not just me. And then kind of similar to the environment form today, you put in the name, the type that you need. Here I'm creating an environment for a specific event and a hackathon event. So I can also specify that in about 90 days, I will no longer need that environment. So I can automatically clean it up. And I can also ask for a Dataverse environment to be created. Select the language here and the currency. And now my request is filed. From an admin point of view, if I refresh that view here, I can see what that the request has come in. If I view that request, I have all of the details that I need to make a decision about it. So I can see if there's any data policies that apply to that environment. I can assign a security group. I can add additional nodes, and then I can approve or reject the environment. Once I hit that approve button, the environment is actually created in the background. And I don't have to kind of from here go to the admin center and manually create it. I don't have to adjust any DLP policies. Kind of everything is taken care of after I hit that approve button there. So really makes it kind of easier to facilitate that communication between the maker and the admin. And also obviously keeps kind of a track history of everything that's been created. And probably one of the simplest things that's part of the CoE kit is a welcome email, and that allows you to send an email to a new maker after they create their first app, flow, chatbot, etc. And the purpose of it, like it's just a flow. You can customize the email that goes out, but the purpose is that someone who creates their app or flow for the first time, they might feel a little bit lonely. And through that welcome email, you're telling them that, hey, we see you. What you're doing is right. We really love it. Here are some resources for you. You can, add a link to your internal community, to your internal wiki, etc. in there. And through that, the maker can discover other makers in their organization, exchange ideas, and continue their maker journey from there. So really, really simple, probably one of the most used components in the kit. And then if we talk about kind of the everyone persona, the first component that we have for them is called the innovation backlog, and that allows really everyone that the app is shared with to share an idea for something. So they put in, they describe the idea basically to say, I have this kind of invoice process. It's really manual. I'm spending 50 hours a week on it. Probably not. These are the people that are impacted by it. And then through kind of the description of that idea, we estimate an ROI, a value, if this were to be picked up for development, and that can make it easier for a development team, like if you have a Power Platform development team, to decide which idea to develop on. It's probably going to be the one that has the most return on investment. It can also serve as a if you're hosting an internal hackathon, the innovation backlog is a great place to kind of source ideas for the hackathon as well. So that's a standalone application that can be used kind of independently of the rest of the kit and really useful for gathering ideas. The other part that's important for everyone is that probably a lot of things are shared with them by their colleagues that spread across kind of different environments. Sometimes it's hard to figure out what actually is valuable and what the organization wants them to use. So we have this concept of the app catalog where an admin can highlight applications for usage. They can categorize them, and then you have kind of a one place where you can launch your applications from. You can leave a star rating and a review for the maker, and you can then improve the application based on that feedback. And it really is kind of serves as an internal app store, I guess. And the third part that's really probably relevant for everyone is once you're finally ready to start your own journey, there's a publicly there's a wealth of videos and content out there on how to start becoming a maker. And the Video Hub is really focused on helping create an onboarding experience for a new maker. So an admin can put together playlists where they can sort videos together, and then that can be internal videos. So as an admin, I record something that I want to share with my makers on kind of the rules of engagement, or I bring in community content that I want my makers to watch, but I structure it into specific playlists that I want the makers to watch. So that kind of is another one of kind of our nurture focused applications, and we've got quite a big backlog of things that we want to focus on in the context of kind of nurturing makers that I'll talk a little bit more about next week. So now a few of the things that are in the kit. I'll put some of the resources in the chat window. We've recorded a couple of videos that walk you through the different components of the kit, so that's a good place to get started. The best place to learn about the kit is our documentation on learn.microsoft.com that really explains kind of the setup, what's in the kit, how to use it, and then in the call next week, we'll discuss kind of how we release the kit. It's monthly on GitHub, and GitHub is also the place where we take feature asks and debug any issues that may occur. So like I said, we release kind of the kit as an open source project on GitHub. We have the releases there, all of our backlog, everything is planned in GitHub. And with that, I'll hand it over to Mike, because we do use the Alm Accelerator that he'll be talking about ourselves to deploy the kit through our dev test and prod environments and release it into GitHub.
Thanks, Manuela. I've got this gap in my shades where like this time of year, the sun always kind of comes in and hits my face. So sorry about that. But so ALM, we talked about at the beginning, I mentioned that I am sort of responsible for ALM when it comes to the CoE starter kit. ALM is application lifecycle management. If you're not familiar with it, it is a it's a concept that's been around for a long time, and it's been around in the code first world and in the low code world as well. However, it's been a difficult journey sometimes in the Power Platform to practice, to practice ALM in general and to practice, good ALM. So the ALM Accelerator that is part of the CoE Starter Kit was built for the CoE Starter Kit initially, and the idea was that we needed an ALM solution to be able to take the CoE Starter Kit, which contains several different Power Platform solutions that are, that have components like flows and Canvas apps and model-driven apps and all of the things that Manuela was kind of showing there. We need a way to be able to deploy that from a development environment in a working state, but also in a reliable way, so that Manuela and team can build new features, they can fix bugs, they can test those internally, and then they can hit the button to essentially deploy that to downstream environments. So those downstream environments being, I'm in my dev environment, this is the inner loop that we're looking at right now. This is technically what's referred to as the inner loop of ALM, where build, test, deploy, and a maker is doing those things, but also there's another group at large, right, that's potentially doing testing as well. So the deployment is more of the outer loop, but there's also additional, and if you'll hit next on this, there's additional parts of ALM that come into play once something is deployed. And you can go ahead and hit the next one. These two sort of outer loop processes of ALM we're not going to talk about today. What we're talking about today with the ALM Accelerator is that sort of inner loop of build, test, deploy. We'll get to next week when we do our deep dive. We're going to talk a little bit more about those two outer circles and how the CoE Starter Kit in particular manages and manages releases and things like that. So next slide. So first and foremost, in Power Platform, any ALM is going to require you to have your components in a solution, which by necessity requires you to have Dataverse in your Power Platform environment. It's just the way that ALM in the Power Platform works. Going forward, it has been that way for quite some time as well. In the future, it's going to be solutions. Everything that you build is going to need to be in a solution in order for, whether it be the ALM Accelerator or it be some in-product ALM, you're going to need to use solutions in order to ship those things from one environment to another. So solutions are the container for your components. Next slide. And I'm going to move through these pretty quick so we can get to the demo. So there are facilities, there's tools available that Microsoft publishes for doing ALM. There are Azure DevOps specific tools that you can install and use in your pipelines in Azure DevOps. There are also GitHub Actions available that you can use if you're a GitHub shop. So the ALM Accelerator leverages these Power Platform build tools for Azure DevOps. The ALM Accelerator is driven primarily by Azure DevOps pipelines, and we have a backlog item in place to get to supporting GitHub workflows as well. We currently do not have that. We have some capabilities with GitHub that we use internally and for our release process, because we do source control all of our source code in GitHub. But as of right now, the GitHub integration is not fully baked in the ALM Accelerator. However, that being said, next slide, Manuela, please. there are GitHub Actions out there. And if you want to hit the next slide, all of the Azure DevOps tasks and GitHub Actions, those two things are the same thing, really. They just use two different words to describe them. But these are things like I can import a solution, I can export a solution, I can unpack a solution, things like that. Things that you can do in the Power Platform that provide that you can integrate into your pipelines or your workflows in GitHub. All of those things are now, they used to be kind of separate, and the GitHub Actions were based on one thing, and the Power Platform build tool tasks were based on PowerShell. And there's been a divergence there between functionality and development of those things in the past. Now everything is based on what's called Power Platform CLI. And the Power Platform CLI doesn't, the tasks don't necessarily expose everything that the Power Platform CLI does. The tasks and the actions are basically a subset of the things the Power Platform CLI does. However, in your pipelines, in your GitHub workflows, you have the ability to use the Power Platform CLI to perform those other actions that maybe the tasks don't expose. And so the Power Platform CLI basically is your best friend when it comes to ALM. And that will be the place where the new functionality will light up first, and then eventually fast follow with new tasks and things like that. So if you're not familiar with the Power Platform CLI, definitely check it out. Definitely try it out. It can be a little intimidating, I think, if you're not a developer and you're not comfortable with command lines. However, there's pretty good documentation out there on how to use it. And if you get stuck in your ALM process, you can always, lean on some of the CLI functionality, which is what we do. And so that kind of leads into what the ALM Accelerator is. The ALM Accelerator is a Canvas app that sits on top of Azure DevOps pipelines, and those pipelines leverage those Power Platform build tasks. It leverages the Power Platform CLI. It leverages some PowerShell scripts as well for where there's gaps between what's possible with the CLI and the tasks. But essentially what we've built with the ALM Accelerator is a set of pipelines that allow you to, one, source control your solutions and source control them in a human readable way. If you've ever exported a solution, you know it's just a zip file. You can unzip that file and you can see some of the things that are going on inside. But there are some things like plugins, Canvas apps that kind of have a binary format, and you can't necessarily read them in a text editor. So what we've built into the pipelines is the ability for you to source control these things into Git and be able to, in a human readable way, look line by line what the changes have been. Also look at who's changed things within the solution, and sort of give you that history of what's changed in the solution over time. So it's a Canvas app that sits on top of those pipelines. And with that, I'll actually just jump into the demo from here. So I'm going to share my screen. And be this one. That's not the ALM Accelerator. That's some work I'm doing on the ALM Accelerator. So this is the ALM Accelerator. This is the Canvas app. The Canvas app is technically split from the pipelines. If you were to take our pipelines, Azure DevOps pipeline templates, you could absolutely use them without the Canvas app. However, the Canvas app provides that sort of easy button layer over top of our pipelines. So you don't necessarily have to interact with Azure DevOps. Your makers don't have to interact with Azure DevOps. They can interact with this on a daily basis, and they can see all of their unmanaged solutions, and they can act on those and source control them and deploy them into downstream environments. Now, I am currently in what we call the sort of advanced maker mode. And I actually don't have a maker mode in this environment that I'm in right now. I generally do in my demo environment. But, however, you have the ability to customize this to the persona that that is being used by. So, for example, words like commit, deploy, most makers would understand what a deployment is. Maybe they wouldn't, but things like commit, these are kind of technical terms that are used in by developers that are familiar with GitHub or Git concepts and things like that. They're familiar with what a pull request is and other things. So you have the ability to actually customize this UX so that you could change this button to say save solution, and then that would be a more familiar term to a maker. You also have the ability to sort of lock down functionality in this app. So I could, for example, hide this import solution. And what import solution does is allow me to pull in solutions from source control, build it off of source control, and pull it into my development environment. I may not want to let people do that. That could be a potentially a more advanced functionality for some people, for some makers, I should say. And you may want to hide that, and you can absolutely do that. Same thing with delete solution here. You can hide that because that's also a potentially destructive act if they accidentally deleted their development solution. What that allows you to do, though, as an advanced maker, is actually wipe out an unmanaged solution, which isn't something you can do easily through the maker portal, right? So if you have an unmanaged solution, I've got my sample solution sitting out here, and this is an unmanaged solution. If I want to delete that, I can absolutely go into the maker portal, and I could choose to delete it from here. Well, maybe not from here, but maybe back on the previous screen, right? So I could absolutely come in here and delete an unmanaged solution. However, that doesn't delete the components under that unmanaged solution. It only deletes the container. And so you're left with all of the stuff that was under that container, and it doesn't necessarily clean up what was there. So we provided this functionality if you really want to actually take an unmanaged solution and delete all the components and the container itself and kind of start fresh, right? So the idea being, I'm going to clean out my development environment. I'm going to delete my unmanaged solution. I'm going to go ahead and import the latest from source control, start fresh with what's in source control at the time. That's what those two pieces of functionality are there for. We're not going to focus too much more on those. What we're going to focus on is more of the source controlling the solution and deploying it to a downstream environment. Now, the first thing you're met with when you come into this app is this maker environment selection screen. This is all the environments that you have access to. It will allow you to say, okay, this is where I've got my unmanaged solution I've been doing work on, and I happen to be doing work in the Alm Accelerator dev environment. And I'll select that, and it'll show me all of the unmanaged solutions I have access to. I can say only my solutions here, so I can kind of pare down this list based on what I have access to, which can be configured in the back end. And we'll go into a little bit of that in the next session, next week, how to configure all of this, how to set this up, things like that. But I've got a sample. So first of all, I've got a deployment profile. A deployment profile determines where specifically I'm going to source control my solutions. It also determines where specifically I'm going to deploy my solutions. So in my case, I've got a Azure DevOps organization out here. It's called P Platform. I've got a project called CoE Starter Kit, a repository called CoE Starter Kit in that project. I've got 3 environments downstream. These are configurable. You could have 2 environments, you could have 5 environments, you could have 100 environments if you want. For example, if you in this case, our default sort of out of the box environment deployment environments are validation, test, and prod. If you had a pre-prod or if you were deploying to multiple production environments, you could absolutely do that. But this is sort of the out of the box setup. So that's what the deployment profile determines. This is sort of the setup, and these are on a solution by solution basis. However, if you have a solution profile in place and you have a solution that you want to use that, you can just select it from the list. So once you have access to that, you can set up other solutions in your with the same deployment profile if you want. All right, so let's take a quick look at our sample solution here. I'm going to open it. The idea, again, being that everything should be based on a solution. We try to land people in the what they say is the pit of success, right? So if I want to add some new components or make changes, that was the wrong window. If I want to make changes to the solution, I'm going to open it from here. It's going to land me directly in the solution. If I add a new app from here, it's going to land in the solution. That's essentially the idea, is to not have people start creating apps from here, which if you create an app from here, it's not going to be in a solution. You're going to have to go to your solution, add it. Same thing with flows. So landing people in a solution to kind of do their work is the idea behind this. And sorry, I got lost. But this is our sample solution. The sample solution kind of exercises all of the different components. It's got flows, it's got canvas apps, it's got model-driven apps, it's got custom tables, it's got connection references, security roles. It's the whole sort of and we keep adding to this as we go. It's got plugins as well, but effectively the idea behind this is for us to be able to exercise the Alm Accelerator, but also for you to kind of get familiar with how it works. And it's all open source, it's all out on GitHub if you wanted to pull this into your environment to test it out. Being that we're the cat team, all of our samples here are cat related. And so this is my cat planner sample app. It's got a custom connector in it that actually reaches out to a public API endpoint that will bring back cat facts. So this is, I can get new daily cat facts here. I can, and this is kind of interesting. I enjoy these. I can like these cat facts, and that will kick off a flow. It will create a record in Power Platform and a custom table that says I liked it. It will send me an email about the cat fact that I liked. I've also got a SharePoint list in here, so I've got my sort of cat to-dos, and that's driven by a data source environment variable. And I'll show you how we take all of these sort of components that are in a solution and put them into source control and then deploy them into a downstream environment using the Alm Accelerator. So the first thing I'll do is in the Cat Planner sample app, I'm just going to make a quick edit. And if we don't have time to get to everything today, since we did start a little bit late, we can absolutely feel free to send me, any questions, and we can absolutely follow up on them next week. But let's see. So this is cat to-dos. I'm actually going to change this to say cat tasks. All right. Simple change. We got some feedback from users that said they didn't like to-dos. They prefer tasks since it's the daily cat task app. I published that. I can get out of here now, and I can go back here. All right, so I'm going to commit this change that I just made with the update to that label. And in order to do that, in the advanced scenario, you're selecting branches. And again, in the sort of advanced experience, it's based on pull requests in Azure DevOps, branches. These things can be obfuscated from your makers by using the more maker driven experience. This provides more flexibility. The other experience kind of guides people down the happy path without them necessarily needing to know what a branch is or needing to know how to create a pull request. But I've got an existing branch out here, and I'm going to go ahead and say change label so I know what has changed. We have the ability to export Power Pages as part of the export process. So if you are using what was Power Apps Portals is now Power Pages, you can include those in your export and deploy those into downstream environments. Bypassing prepare here, we'll go back and we'll look at what that means here in a second after I commit. All right, so That's going to go ahead and it's going to kick off our commit pipeline in Azure DevOps. And if we give it a second, you'll see the progress indicator update. Okay, there we go. As an advanced maker, I have the ability to drill down into that. Now we're in Azure DevOps, and this is the pipeline that got kicked off by that commit process. There's a lot going on here that we could probably touch on next week when we get into the sort of the more advanced functionality. But effectively, this is taking a solution, it's downloading it, it's unpacking it, and it's committing it into a repository in Azure DevOps. Now, the thing that I skipped over when I was committing is the ability to configure deployment settings. And this is huge, right? This is the sort of the biggest part of the Canvas app itself. This allows you to set what the environment variables are going to be in the downstream environment. It allows you to create connection references or connections in the downstream environment for connection references. It allows you to share Canvas apps with group teams or Azure AAD groups. It allows you to set the owners of flows, all of those things that you would, if you just deployed a solution through a pipeline, you would have to go in and do manually in the downstream environment if you didn't set all of this up. So the benefit of using the app obviously is this primarily, because all of the other functionality you could do in Azure DevOps, just by running a pipeline and supplying a couple of parameters. You can also do that with this, but this creates a giant payload of data that would be difficult to kind of create on your own without the app. But anyway, so we've got two connection references here. We've got a Dataverse one, and that's the one that writes the cat facts to our Dataverse table that we like. We've got an Office 360 Outlook, which is the one that sends me an email about the cat facts I like. I have existing, we've got our environments up here, right? So validation, test, and prod, because we need to configure these for each of the environments in that flow. I've got an existing connection here. If I needed to, and there wasn't one, I could add a new one. You can see that landed me in my validation environment. I click create. That'll go ahead and create a new connection for me, and I can then go select that from the list. When it comes to environment variables, we've got, I've got a couple of different environment variables in here. We've got string variables, numbers, JSON. We've got this is our SharePoint list that we saw in the CatFacts app that has points to a site. It also points to a list inside of SharePoint, so we can specify that. And we've also got a secret environment variable in here. The way that you configure this is to actually put the URL to the secret in Key Vault. Not the ideal necessarily UX right now, but you can absolutely do secret environment variables using that capability. Canvas apps sharing with AAD groups. So in my downstream environment, I want to share it with the people in this group. If I click on that, I can actually go see who's in that group. Right, that lands me in the Azure portal, so I can see it's going to be shared with all of these people. And all those people will be able to view it. I could let them edit it. I could let them view and share it. Group teams. So this allows you to create AAD group teams in a downstream environment. The reason you would want to do that is primarily to provide access to things in your solution. So for example, you've created a table in your solution, a custom table. You want people who are using your app in the downstream environment to have access to that table, right? The read access, write access, whatever it may be. You would likely create a custom role for that. You would add that custom role to your solution, and then you would want to grant that role to people in the downstream environment for them to be able to read, write. So this is what that provides you to be able to do. You specify an AAD group, some roles, you give it a name and a business unit, and it will generate that automatically. All of this comes down to the fact that we want a no-touch deployment, right? We don't want makers or admins, for that matter, to have to go down to a downstream environment and configure anything once it's deployed. We want it to be in a working state. We want it to be ready to go once it's deployed. And all of this kind of leads up to that ability to do that, right? If you don't have connections available, then your flows won't activate. If you don't have the group team available, people won't be able to access certain assets, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what pretty much this screen is helping you to do, is put your app in a working state. And then flows, again, this flows need to be activated. They need to be activated by a specific user in a downstream environment. We have the ability to not activate them if you don't want to, et cetera. There's, the ability to share those flows with teams. This is a sort of a couple of these things are just the state of the platform right now, where there are some gaps in deployment where a flow can be, or an app can be shared, for example, with a group of users or a user, but that flow that app calls may not necessarily get shared. So some of this is sort of just to fill in the gaps that are in the platform right now to be able to get to that working state in the downstream environment. And then custom connectors, similarly, you can share those with group teams. And that could be a group team you created here, or it could be an existing group team in that downstream environment. And then finally, we have the ability to upgrade a solution, update versus upgrade. Update, we will update by default, but if you want to upgrade, which is a sort of allows you to delete components in a downstream environment. If you remove something in your maker environment, you want that to go away in the downstream environment, you would select to upgrade that in the downstream environment. All right, so we are about out of time. My pipeline is still running. Actually, no, it just finished. So it did export. I already had and if I'll just give me 1 minute, I already had a pull request out here. And that pull request was created by deploying. You can see I selected the source branch. That was where I exported. This is my target branch. That pull request is out here. We can look at what files have changed. Some of these are fairly noisy changes simply because the way the platform works now. There's some noisy changes in here that may not necessarily map to the change that you made. However, you can get down to the place where you actually see what the specifics changes were. We look at source under our Canvas app, and we look at the main screen. Nope, that's not the one. Nope, sorry, that's the editor state. So let's go to main. We can actually see all of the code in here. It's not just a binary file. This is the specific code for our app that's in here. And we can see what, what has changed over time. All right. With that, the last thing I just want to say real quick is what happened when we committed the changes is it actually kicked off a build. So it's deploying to that validation environment as part of this pull request process. And it's deploying to make sure that the solution can be built, it can be deployed, and that it can be configured with all of those deployment settings that we set up. And once that passes, somebody can come in here, approve, and complete this. That would get pushed to test. And then similarly, the next step will be to push to production after that. All right. I think we are about out of time. There was one last slide, and I'll just kind of skip down. And I wasn't showing the slideshow, but we'll say from current slide. So that's not right. Anyway, so you can get more information. We've got all of the Alm Accelerators documentation is on the docs on learn.microsoft.com. We've got a learning catalog out there. We've got videos that we link to that show you kind of how to use it, how to set it up. And then we've got our GitHub repo where you can ask questions at any time. So, all right.
Yeah, this is really good, Mike and Manuela. Really appreciate you doing this. I had a few questions asked me online, I think about a month or so. that were answered in this one 60-minute lesson. So I'll just, when we have the video, just refer people to the video. So really appreciate you. I think that's all we have for today. If you have any more questions and you don't want to wait until next week, you can send it over to me. I'll try to get it over to Mike or try to look at some of the materials that is available and try to answer those questions to you. If not, we can collect and then answer them next week as well. All right, Mike, thank you, my friend. Manuela, thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you,
Folks, take care
Thank you.
and have a good weekend. All right, bye-bye. We'll see you
Thank
next
you.
week.
Bye.
Thank you.